Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I do hope it finds you well. My name is John, and I am an author. And let me actually improve my light balance in here a little bit. There we go. Um, and I'm coming to you here with another Storytime Thursday, where I will be reading chapter 30 of The Shadow of the Past. And before we get started, the usual plug for myself. I'd really appreciate it if you were to like, share, subscribe, tap to get notifications. All of that would really help me and my channel out. As would checking out my website, my socials, my books. All of that will be linked down below as well as at the end of the video. And would be greatly appreciated by me. To get started here, I'm going to read chapter 30, Putting the Past to Rest. Valinar stood in quiet contemplation and stared at the slowly disintegrating armor that had just a moment before been Kyral. Created from magecraft and without his will holding it together, it was fading back into the elements from which it was made. He reflected as he healed his wounds on what kind of man Kyral had been and whether or not he had reformed at the end. As he stood lost in thought, Valinar failed to notice the sounds of battle receding away from him, as word of who had prevailed moved through both armies. With the armor gone, all that was left was Kyral's great axe, which alone had not been made by Kyral's will or skill. Glimtra was almost as famous as its owner had been. It had been forged of a metal that Valinar did not recognize in a previous eon under the skies of a distant Terra. What stories it could tell were it able to speak, Valinar could not guess. Countless tales of bloodshed and heroism he did not doubt. Whether it had been created for Kyral or whether it was forged for another and merely come into Kyral's possession sometime later, Valinar did not know, and it did not matter. This beautiful and terrible weapon was the only reminder of the warrior that Kyral once was, and perhaps was again at the end, rather than the tyrant he became. As these thoughts chased themselves around Valinar's mind, he became aware that there was one approaching him cautiously. He looked up to see an elderly orc woman walking slowly toward him. Her yellowish-red features were etched by cares and time had bent but not bowed her proud frame. She was garbed in the same gray as the rest, but had a silver chain around her neck. She regarded Valinar carefully for several moments before addressing him. "I am Gilterai, chosen leader of the people of Kyral," were the words spoken by her deep and melodious voice. "As the duel is ended and Kyral is no more, I have been ordered to give you a message from Kyral." "What is the message?" "Kyral wishes that you reflect upon the harm done to Sirana's past and work to give his people a home free from their imprisonment." "Is there anything else that Kyral would have me know?" "Just this, he hopes that, in the end, you will remember him." Valinar stared in thought at Giltry for several minutes before saying quietly, "Thank you. I wish to speak with you at length, but not now. There is much to think on, and the battle still rages." Giltry bowed and moved away slowly. Valinar bent down and carefully picked the weapon up. It was lighter than it looked and seemed to pulse with a power that was wholly its own. Valinar regarded Glimtra for a long moment, contemplating what to do with it, and finally he stumbled upon a most befitting monument to Kyral. Summoning all his strength, Valinar swung the axe two-handed at the jutting rock against which Kyral had died. With a mighty crack, the axe blade was buried deep within the stone. Concentrating upon the stone, it melded together around the axe blade. None would be able to retrieve it save by Valinar's will, and he willed that it should remain there forever. A silent and lone monument to the good man that Kyral had once been. It was then that Valinar noticed that he no longer heard the sounds of battle around him. He turned slowly and saw that Kyral's forces were looking at him expectantly, Gilterai waiting calmly at their head, and he could sense in the distance that his own forces were doing the same. It was his move next. What he said and did in the next few minutes would determine the path that Sirana took in the coming years. He walked slowly around to the gentle slope on the top of the jutting rock. As he walked, he contemplated Kyral's fate and whether or not he too would someday become a tyrant. He wondered if there would be any to remember him and what he did, or whether his name would too become a curse. As he reached the top of the rock, the silence around him became deafening as everything, seemingly even nature, had paused and was gazing upon him. It was not them that Valinor regarded, but the gleaming spire before him, piercing the heavens with a tremendous amount of area bound up inside. He stretched his mind further and felt the other places, the places where the elementals had dwelled, and felt the power that had been stored there as well. He concentrated and slowly pulled the area from them, a task taking all his effort and concentration. There was a great trembling of the Terra from such shifts in power, but Valinor was able to hold any destruction in check. Those former places of power would now slowly pass into dust with the unending march of time. The glistening spire, on the other hand, built more by Kyral's magecraft than by any engineering skill, seemed to dim and fade suddenly, and in the wind of the world it seemed to slowly disintegrate into dust as a sandcastle in a stiff breeze. It took a few moments for the spire to disappear, and once it had, save for its lowest foundations, all the eyes which had watched its disappearance with fascination turned once more to him. As he had done before the battle, Valinor concentrated and lifted himself some distance above the ground so that he would be seen by all, and projected his voice through the air so that not only could the soldiers hear him, but every being on Sirana. Valinor took a deep breath before beginning. People of Sirana, his voice boomed out across the Terra, the time has come for us to put the past to rest. The past is an important thing to remember, Valinor continued. It teaches us important lessons and informs us who and what we are. But we have all of us spent the past 10,000 years living too much in the past. We have looked backwards, trying to reclaim lost glories and lost powers rather than moving forward. That must stop, he emphasized. And to help this goal, I have removed the area from all those places of power that our lives once revolved around. And to accomplish that, both myself and the others who have taken custody of the elements will serve merely in an advisory capacity. Unlike our predecessors, we will not try to change you or force you to become better. You must each decide for yourself whether or not you will become better, and better does not always mean stronger. For those of you who have been seen the records of the powers your people once wielded in former times, know that it is a lie, he shouted. Kyral and the elementals thought they could make your people better by giving you greater power. But if our past shows us anything, it is that greater power does not make one better, but rather makes our mistakes have greater consequences. If you are wondering why, then why all the 7 of us are in the same position as Kyral and his former friends, he continued, then understand that for a time it will be necessary. The undoing of the prison and the places of power is to stabilize the elements upon this Terra, and they will continue to be unstable for some years. While they are, it will be necessary for us to serve as a balance to prevent serious damage from occurring. And speaking of serving as a balancing force, he went on, there has been far too much violence in recent years upon this Terra. For the time being, the 7 of us shall work to maintain a period of peace and cooperation. We will not force any into anything, but we will try to foster diplomacy and communication and insist upon a number of years without open conflicts to give everyone a chance to resettle and reorganize their lives. Sooner or later, the day will come in which, and I give you my word on this, the 7 of us will willingly lay down the power that we have so recently taken up. We have no right to rule you, to control you. And although the young seldom understand, no one that has been born mortal is really suited to handle immortality. We can only move forward if we work together. We must embrace the humans and goblins and elves and dwarves and orcs that have been wrongfully imprisoned for the past millennia. We must work together with them to rebuild this world that was once theirs as much as ours. Looking at this land, it is clear that it is being isolated for so long has worn out the soil. It still has some life left in it, and with our help, it can become viable again. There is no knowing the ways in which so long an imprisonment has affected them, Alinar continued. Kyral was kept able to keep much of the anger for this injustice in check, but there are bound to be flare ups and problems. We shall deal with them as they rise. There is no reason that the return of these people should cause any large conflicts, and if you work with us, we can assure you that does not happen. As I have said, I am not going to ask that you forget the past, Valinar concluded. I am asking that you put the past behind you and look to the future. If you work with me, and more importantly, work with each other, we can make this Terra a better place. For you and for your children and all posterity. After Valinar had finished speaking, there was a pause that seemed like an eternity. Then the soldiers on both sides near him began to cheer, and their cheer was taken up by those near them and spread like wildfire through the mass of soldiers. Valinar could feel it through the air as well, as throughout the Terra everyone stood and cheered. As the cries of celebration and hope arose around him, it made Valinar smile. He knew there was a lot of work ahead, but for the first time in what seemed like a very long while, Valinar was hopeful for the future. All right, another short chapter here. I think next week I'm probably going to plow through both the final chapter and the epilogue because they are both really short. But I really hope you enjoyed the story so far. I would really appreciate it if you were to leave a comment below with your feedback. I'm happy to take any and all criticism, feedback, anything you got. I would be more than happy to take. As long as it's polite and constructive, of course, but I feel like that goes without saying. I would really appreciate it if you were to like, share, subscribe, tap that notification bell, and help out my channel. Go to Amazon and check out my book, as well as the second one, The Shadow and the Sunburn Red. And check out my socials, my website, all of that. So I've been continuing to do daily writing prompts, except for on holidays, that I've been enjoying. Oh, so sorry. So yeah, I want to thank you all. I will catch you on the next one. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you get the chance to do or experience something creative.